You can't win if you don't trust yourself to win, if you don't think you deserve it or you think you're good enough to do this.
This is the My Campaign Coach podcast, where we talk about how to win elections. Every week, we let you hear straight from the best consultants, operatives, and candidates in the game, all for one reason: to help you win. For more information about how we can help you win, visit mycampaigncoach.com. Now, here's your host, Raj Schaefer.
Welcome to the How to Run for Office podcast from My Campaign Coach. Vaclav Platenik is a native of the Czech Republic, and he's worked throughout Europe in political public relations, campaigns, and elections, with most of his time spent in between the UK and his homeland of the Czech Republic. His current occupation is working as campaign manager for the Christian Democrat Party, a center-right party placed on Christian values and principles. And he is also the co-founder of the Women's Campaign School, where he helps prepare Czech women to run for office through campaign, communication, and leadership training. It's really easy to forget that campaigns occur far outside of the United States, but I think there's a lot we can learn by knowing more about the differences and similarities between how different countries and parties approach elections and campaigns. Vaclav is our first international guest, and I really appreciate him being willing to come on today and come on the podcast, because as I've read more about him and his party and the work that he's done training campaigns, I see a lot of similarities with what we're trying to do through My Campaign Coach, and I'm interested to learn more about how they prepare candidates and run campaigns in the Czech Republic. Vaclav, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
It's great to meet you. I got to read a lot about you and see some of your other interviews, and I felt that you would be a great fit and have a lot to share here. Let's start out with talking about your background and how you got involved in politics, and maybe just a little bit about growing up in the Czech Republic. And there have obviously been some big changes during your lifetime there. Let's kind of talk a little bit about your background and what motivated you to get involved.
Well, first of all, I have to say there weren't much change or many changes throughout my life as opposed to the life of my older brothers or my parents. I was born in 1990. So it was just after the what we call Velvet Revolution, so after the fall of the communist regime and just when the country was on its way to democracy. So I was lucky enough to enjoy the full democracy as we tend to call it, as opposed to my older colleagues who spent 10, 20 or 30 years in under the communist rule. So that's the difference. I went to study communications as my major in university, just simply of interest in that topic. And I also felt passionate about politics. I was one of the creepy kids who tends to follow the debate on TV, Sunday shows, as we have it. So it was quite natural for me to join local clubs, local organizations, and volunteer in campaigns, just handing out leaflets in a branded T-shirt. So that was pretty much my start. It took a while to do my university and start working in a regular PR agency in Prague to actually enter the world of politics. So it took me, 10 years through the volunteering, junior jobs when I actually got involved in political campaigns as a professional.
Yeah, that's very much the same path that I took. I was 10 years old when I first started handing out leaflets and knocking on doors, helping support candidates back here in my state of Texas. And, I spent about a good 10 years or so volunteering and helping out, and then managed after I graduated college to get involved. And it's been a fun ride ever since. When you did make that transition to working in the PR agency and starting to get involved in politics, you obviously had a great passion for it. What were some of the things that were driving you? Was it issues? Was it a lot of the national debate that was going on there? What was it that kind of pushed you to becoming involved in that sphere?
It was definitely partly an issue as well as the particular candidate, because the first campaign I was actually hired, it was almost for free anyway, but I was
That's how it works.
Hired on the basis of my expertise, was a referendum campaign in one of the city districts here in Prague, the capital of the Czech Republic. It was a campaign against the town hall, the corrupt establishment, and we won the referendum. And the candidate or the person who ran the referendum then ran for a mayor and actually won with a great margin. So it was passionate. He was passionate about the referendum, about the beating up the corrupt establishment at the town hall. We ran the campaign with almost zero budget, really doing leaflets and all the posters in his garage. So it was sort of really like grassroots campaigning there. So that was actually my entrance to that world. That particular guy was also a well-known member of the Christian Democrats, who then introduced me to the administration of the party and the headquarters, and I was able then to pitch for the job of a spokesperson and PR person at that party.
Very nice. So when you talk about grassroots campaigning and those types of things, those are ideas fairly familiar to me. But I want to find out, when you're looking at a campaign, kind of go a little bit more forward to where being a campaign manager, what are some of the main ways you guys spend money in a race or organize a campaign? Kind of give me a little bit of a 10,000 foot view of how you guys approach a campaign for your legislature.
I think there might be many differences in the perspective from the US to Europe, or especially the post-Soviet Europe, let's say, because we tend to take more and more tools and techniques from the West, especially from US and now from France, Germany, UK. But the media mix tends to be sometimes quite old school. We still invest lots of money in the outdoor advertising, basically billboards and this kind of tools, as opposed to TV advertising, which is well established in US, but it's actually forbidden in the Czech Republic and in most of the countries in Europe. So you're not allowed to broadcast political advertising in the main broadcasting channels.
Interesting. So do you guys do much door-to-door campaigning, passing out leaflets at doors and talking to voters directly, or what are some of the main grassroots tools you use?
Well, I think this is a great question, but it goes even deeper than you might think. To be able to do grassroots campaigning and door-to-door, you need people, lots of people.
Right.
And it's not common, unlike in the US, it's not common to have many people on your side during campaigns, because it's not as usual to volunteer for campaigns or to have the massive support of people who just chip in for a day or a couple of hours. It's not usual. It's partly, or the main reason for this is the heritage of the communist regime, because it was very uncommon or unpopular to join the political life as such. So people still, after 25 years, still tend to be suspicious about joining the race or putting a branded T-shirts. So it's I was definitely one of the small margin of people doing this. It's getting better every race, every year, but it's not definitely not enough to do the proper well-planned door-to-door or grassroots. It's possible in the smaller races if you run for a city mayor or a single mandate, for example, for a Senate, as we have it here, to put together a group of volunteers that work for you and also hand out leaflets and door to door, or have some quite sophisticated system how to target streets and districts and so on. But on the national level, it's rather uncommon and it's very hard to put these people together. That's what we're trying here as well, when I'm a campaign manager for the Christian Democrats, to put together a youth group of supporters, basically doing this from scratch.
Gotcha. And so kind of be able to take the fact that the younger people of your age and younger are not as affected by that the specter of that heritage of communism and being afraid of being involved politically, helping kind of try to make that more normal for them. Is that right?
Definitely. If you have a group of people volunteering for a campaign, you are 90%, you're going to be 90% sure they're just youngers, people 20, 25.
Interesting, because we actually have kind of, in many cases, kind of the opposite problem here in the States with a lot of younger people with the advent of social media and a lot of these tools, it being harder in some cases to get a whole lot of young people involved. Maybe it's just that we'll never get as many as we want to, even if we have a whole lot. We'll never be satisfied. I always want more. But we have, especially conservatives, we have a lot of a lot of older folks, a lot of folks in even their 50s and 60s that are helping out in different ways. And that tends to be where a lot of the volunteers are. folks that already they've established a career, they've got some free time, they've got their income established, and are wanting to serve another way. And then it's primarily the very politically involved youth, not a large number of them. It's just a small minority that will get, kind of weird folks like you and me that get involved as kids that want to do this, that start watching debates and stuff at 10 years old.
Well, about the older folks, we are also fortunate enough to have some older folks helping us, but they are especially party members.
Yes.
So they're not volunteers from taken from the street or who applied, but they're party members.
So what are some of the other types of grassroots activities that you guys do during your campaigns, if you're not focusing on canvassing and those types of things?
We are trying to, apart from establishing this, the party color, that our brand color is yellow. So we established what we call a yellow team with the hashtag Hello Yellow, also in English.
Right.
So it's sort of a general platform for people trying to or wanting to help the campaign. So apart from this initiative, we also have a youth group, or the Young Christian Democrats, who are basically the working force behind most of the campaigns, what our party does, because they're connected to all those students' initiatives, students' clubs, sports clubs. They're basically young, active people with a huge social potential. So we're trying to use that for their networking, their persuasion, and their activity in their local communities where they live, because they're all around the country.
Very, very nice. When you're looking at elections, so one of the things that we do here in the United States, because we have public voter rolls, I can, when I'm approaching campaign, especially if I'm looking at canvassing operations or individual voter contact, I'm able to get a list of all the voters, and I can see election history, not who they voted for, but I can see which elections they voted in and which party primaries. And so when I'm doing my canvassing operations, I can use tools like, in our case, Campaign Sidekick or some software platform to know exactly which houses or which people I need to go talk to. When you're looking at that, even when you have enough volunteers or staff to be able to help do the canvassing, do you have the capacity to be able to target based on those kind of narrow parameters?
Definitely not to that level as you know it, you in the US or maybe in France or UK, because that's one of the biggest differences between US and European campaigning, this phenomenon of data protection. Mm-hmm. The approach to data protection and personal data protection in US is completely different than in Europe, where thanks to the regulations and former experience, we tend to be very protective about data. So, to my knowledge, to my experience, in the US you can access these lists, or you can buy databases from, I don't know, magazine subscriptions, mm-hmm. or mobile companies, or car hire companies, or many like that. It's absolutely unthinkable in Europe, and specifically in Czech Republic. You basically can't own data unless you collect them yourself. So if we want to target, for example, when canvassing or when just planning the media buying, we have to use lots and lots of secondary data. So we have to use some statistical methods from the National Statistics Office, which are available and free. We have to do our own research, and we have to collect the experience from previous years ourselves. So the canvassing and targeting isn't by far as effective as it is in the US or UK, where you can target basically individual addresses or households. It's not going to happen here, but on a bigger scale, we are doing quite a similar way. Not streets and households, but districts, let's say, larger parts. And of course, in some countries, it's not our case, unfortunately. In some countries, they were already able to design their own softwares for that. As you mentioned, a couple of those, they have some tailor-made, especially in Germany, they have some tailor-made applications, how they can, collect the data from the statistics and other sources, and then manage the door-to-door and canvassing campaign.
That's really interesting, because I know for me, it's something that we take for granted. I mean, the doing these kind of canvassing operations, it's honestly a lot of what I do. I actually am part owner of a software company that helps facilitate that, and we do a ton of that kind of work. And that's a lot of what, when it comes to a grassroots campaign here in the United States, that's like the number one thing I tell people, because it's cheap. It only requires sweat and some shoe leather, and it's a little bit of software. And then you go and talk to folks, and that's really a huge advantage for insurgent candidates, for the folks that don't have all the money. Because the big money candidates are spending theirs on mailers and TV ads, and the guys that don't have all the money, they're the ones that are knocking the doors and building individual relationships. And it's kind of hard for me to imagine how you win a campaign without that. You take that tool out of my tool chest, and that makes it a lot harder. It's intriguing. When you're looking at elections, so let's kind of go to the campaign training side. So tell me a little bit about the Women's Campaign School, and what kind of motivated you to found that?
That's my great fun, as I call it. It's my hobby. Many people, especially colleagues, make fun of me because I'm a man founding a women campaign school.
It just means you're smarter than they are.
Usual, yeah. Well, first of all, women's role in politics and their representation is a great issue in Europe. I believe it's very similar in US as well, but it's quite big in Europe as well, thanks to the European Union and other initiatives. But it was never a massive topic in between or within my party. But my idea was, we can't wait to be still pointed at. You're not doing enough for your female members. The fact is that we have more female members than we have male members. But when it comes to the members of parliament or mayors or elected officials as general, they tend to be just men for generally known reasons. So I was thinking what I can do to change it, and I went abroad to find some inspiration, and I found about the Women Campaign School in US at Yale University, which is a well-known organization. They have a similar initiative in Ireland. It's called Women for Election, and there are some others non-political initiatives by McKinsey & Company and large corporate consulting firms how to enhance the role of women in politics. So I just read all the materials and tried to look at the best practices abroad, and just jotted down 3 main values on which we built that training program. First, it's training, the general knowledge how to run, how to win, because that's what you need when you want to start, but it's simply not enough. The second value is networking, because that's specifically important in a European context, when we don't have, with a different system of party functioning, we have a different primary votes, we have a different approach to campaign financing, and so networking is something you need to absolutely have in your campaign and political life especially. And a third value was bonding, creating good relationships. So not just networking, but really making a friendship and making your group of supporters who can really help you when you need it, and sort of bring you up. Because what we found out, generally, the women in politics and in the corporate life as well don't tend to support each other, which is one of the greatest obstacles in their enhancements, actually. So we jotted down these values: training, networking, bonding, and tried to come up with a curriculum for the school. And we basically used what works in the US and the UK and other countries, and tried to establish the first year of the Women Campaign School. We had about 30 women there. We had 14 lecturers, with one lecturer who came to Czech Republic from US, it was American, speaking to our women, and it was great. And last year we won a Czech PR award for that campaign, because it was also a reputational thing. So it's we're planning the next year already. So it's a great success, I would say.
That's fantastic. When you're putting them through the campaign side of that, what are some of the fundamentals or the core lessons that you want to communicate to them when it comes to how to win elections there?
Well, what we always start is that wants to run and wants to win. What I find out during my career within the party is when you ask a man to run, he's like, of course I will run. Who else than me? And when you ask a woman to run, she's usually like, why me? There are plenty of other people who are better than me. So what we try to, what I always ask my lecturers and coaches who are at the academy, what I always ask them to do first is to motivate, give the motivation and the confidence for them to run, because you can't win if you don't trust yourself to win, if you don't think you deserve it or you think you're good enough to do this. So the first thing is not really a practical or tactical or technical, it's really sort of a psychological and motivational to be able. If you want to win, then you can motivate the people to work on your team, you can get your sponsors, you sort of are better than in planning because you start to see the opportunities, and your campaign can have the power and the energy that attracts the people. Voters tend to vote someone who is the favorite, the number one, not someone who is there to lose.
Yep. No, you're 100% right. That confidence is absolutely critical. You have to be able to project a belief that this is the person who's the best one possible to win this seat. They're gonna win. Are you gonna be on board? And that's really really important lesson. From there, once you start looking at the strategic, the tactical, the logistical type of functions, what are some of the major lessons that you try to push there?
What I always say is to start with analysis and some research. Many races are too small to have proper money for research or polling, right. But it shouldn't be a disadvantage, or you shouldn't just skip that step. Mm-hmm. Don't do your homework. So even if it is a small race, a smaller city, or just one single seat race, in which there aren't much money, definitely, I always say to start with your research and analysis. Talk to people you trust to give you an honest opinion about yourself, about your backgrounds. Talk to people to find out about your opponents. Try to analyze the secondary data. Is there any statistics from the town hall? Is there any public calendar of public events that you can attend? Do your homework first, because that's sort of the advantage that gives you when you actually start campaigning. You already have some general framework in which you can operate. Not just start, because what people usually do or tend to do is start campaigning by printing some leaflets, or putting themselves on billboards with not really good idea about what to tell to who.
Right, you got to know, and it's really remarkable how similar those first steps are. That's exactly the same type of stuff that I tell a candidate here in the States to do, and especially on those local races, because a lot of the candidates, when I first work with them, they're running for a city or a county level, or maybe a state legislative position. In a lot of cases, they don't have the money to go do a ton of polling or in-depth research or hire a firm to go handle that for them. But there's a lot of stuff that you can get by just checking out, like I said, some community calendars and figure out events that are going on, by looking at other organizations and their calendars events, by looking at publicly available data looking at public polling, writing down and figuring out what are the issues that matter in these localities and what are my positions on them and how can I help these people that care about these specific things. And I love that that's the similarities there. So what are some of the financial rules that you guys have over there? Because like for instance on the state and city level, we have limitations on who can give. So a company, a corporation cannot donate directly, but we don't have any kind of financial limits, at least here in our state. On the federal level, we have limits, both as far as who can donate as well as how much. And in some states and cities, you have very strict limitations. So there's a lot of variety between the different states as far as what will allow. What kind of campaign finance rules do you guys have?
So the campaign finances are the rules for the campaign finances are becoming more and more strict here in the Czech Republic. It's less strict in the countries on the east, where it is still quite a rodeo, let's say, with the massive funds being spent on campaigns. But here in the Czech Republic, they have established limits on how much money you can spend on the national-wide campaign. There are strict rules on the campaign and party finances because you need to have a transparent account so everyone can check what money are being spent on what. You have this every year. You have to publish your accounting to be scrutinized by the parliament. So I think it's being more and more civilized, I would say. On the lower levels, the rules are less strict, especially if you run in a middle-sized city. But again, you will never spend that much money, and if you would probably get the kind of attention you wouldn't like from some finance authority office or something like that.
Right. I can definitely understand that. Yeah, we publish everybody has to file of one sort or another a campaign finance disclosure showing money you brought in and who it was from and how much, and money that went out and who it went to and what it was for. I know we're pretty familiar with those, but yeah, once again on the local level, it varies widely. In a city like the one I live in, spending $100,000 on a contested race for city council is not unheard of. Whereas spending $3,000 or $4,000 in a smaller town might really raise a lot of eyebrows and make people think you were trying to buy the election, have that negative attention you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, on that note, I just would like to mention that unlike US, I think in Europe it's becoming more and more common that rich people enter the races.
Right.
You know it from Italy with Mr. Berlusconi. Here in Czech, we have this guy called Babiš. There was similar one in Netherlands. So with the businessmen having unlimited resources, the nature of races become quite different. And these are also the people who bring to Europe usually US consultants because they can pay for them. But that's also the main driver of the rules, main driver of the change of the legislature about the campaign rules and financing rules.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I know that there's been a lot more of U.S. consultants being active over in Europe, and as some of the money has changed as far as how much is being involved, and more folks that have greater means of themselves that are getting involved and running for office. I've definitely heard of more and more people from, especially the national side, going and consulting in Europe and different countries, and I would imagine that has some interesting side effects, like the ones you're talking about as far as the changes in campaign finance rules. When you're looking at some of these campaigns and you're creating a message, so you have throughout the campaign you want to communicate, this is who I am as a candidate, these are the things that I believe, and this is what I'll do when I run for office. When you're trying to look at crafting that message and trying to how you communicate that to your voters, what are some of the main facets main questions you're thinking through as you're deciding, hey, this message is going to work, this is going to be something that communicates what I want to? You talk me through some of your messaging strategy. From
my experience in Czech politics, people often run without the proper message, or if they have one, they are never really strict about the message discipline, let's say. The majority of people I met were about to run on the basis of what they did, I was successful in this, and that's the reason why you should vote for me for this job again. Or I take this for granted, and there is no reason why the voters shouldn't take this for granted as well. Being it the former successes or any kind of benefits that the candidate should or should not have. What I try to tell them is to look at the issues you care about. What is your agenda? We call it political program or manifesto here, and which one you identify yourself the most. So, of course, you care about education, healthcare, traffic safety, and social affairs. But if you are a teacher or are well known in the social sector, for example, running a non-profit or something, you should build that message structure about the topic you're most trustworthy about or in. And then if you want to talk about healthcare or education, when you are this non-profit guy, if you want to talk about healthcare or education, try to build the narrative about the main topic, that your non-profit, about helping people in your organization and how it affects healthcare issues or education issues, how it affects families or parents, how you solve their problems. So that's how what I tend to do. Look at your agenda, look at your list of your issues. Try to identify one which you're most trustworthy at, and build that narrative about that one.
I think that's a really good way to approach that, because you got to identify first, where am I credible and why? Where do I have that trust you talked about, and what is my background? So, like, where have I had that experience, that success, and where people can look at me and say, yes, obviously, Vaclav knows something about this, and he's a rock star in this area. And then you translate that and connect that with the other areas that are important to your potential voters, to be able to say, look, I'm a rock star at healthcare, and I've run a healthcare company. I've done great there, but this is where I think about education. This is why you should listen to me, being given that my background's in healthcare. This is why you should listen to what I have to say about education policy for elementary education type thing. So one of the things that I would love to kind of use as we wrap up is to kind of get a little bit of feedback from you as far as observing U.S. politics. I'm sure there's lots of craziness with looking at the presidential election last year and some of those things. But I wonder if there's any insights or advice that you might have, especially for lower level, below the presidential side, for campaigns that you think might translate well to the United States audience.
I have to say, most of the knowledge and know-how we have here is taken from the U.S. So that's what we try to employ some of the methods and techniques here in Europe from what we have from the U.S. But what we have here, what you might not have in the U.S., or maybe take it for granted and not as really a tactical tool, is meeting people where they usually are. Let me explain this to you. We have elections coming in 2 months, so of course we organize meetings and town halls and whatever, door to door, if we have the chance. But as I said in the beginning, there's always a public calendar, public list of events that take place in the cities. I mean, festivals, through music festivals during the summer season, or the beginning of school year, and these kind of things. And it's quite common for a candidate in Czech Republic to attend these events, not without being without being officially invited, without the opportunity to speak there, but we'll just attend the event, just a regular chap. And if you're fortunate enough to be well known and people recognize you, you have a chance to talk to them. And when you're lucky, you are able to shake 100 hands during a day in the sort of a natural environment where people usually gather during an event which isn't originally political. So different kind of people come there, and they have usually in just a better mood. And you don't have to start. You don't have to start with the rule, message first. When you talk to people, you can just regularly chat. That's what we still have 2 months till the polling day, so we're not in what we call the hot period of the campaign.
Right.
But everyone works 100% already. So this is exactly what our candidates spend most of the time with. This time prior to elections, because that simply works and people appreciate that. So maybe that's something you might want to think about in US.
I think that's a wonderful idea. Right now, in the U.S., most campaigns and most times when candidates are going meeting people, it seems like they're already in political environments. They're going into and at least some kind of event that has a political tone to it or a natural political audience. And I've very rarely seen at a music festival or at a non-political function where there's no political tie-in at all, seen many candidates showing up and having that low profile, shaking hands, meeting people. And I think that's a great way to go about it. You have the one disadvantage is it's not a targeted audience, so you're not being able to say, okay, I know I'm talking to voters, I know I'm talking to my kind of voters, but I think it helps personalize the candidate and show the regular guy side or regular woman side that it's not some elitist that's out there wearing their suit and always has their hair just right and always has their team around them. They're out enjoying the same things I do, because when it comes down to it, having those things in common, knowing that you're voting for somebody that's like you, that shares those same types of passions and enjoyments and background that you have, that's a huge factor in getting people to bond with you psychologically and eventually give them your vote.
And maybe it's a different case in US, but especially here in Czech Republic and maybe in Europe, less and less people tend to come to political functions.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you put out an event, come here, meet this politician, talk to him, like different kind, and less people will come. If you go to public function, just a regular chap, you might be more lucky.
I think that's a wonderful, wonderful piece of advice. Well, Vaclav, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure to get to learn a little bit more about how you guys do run elections and win campaigns in the Czech Republic, and with your background with the Christian Democrat Party. And I'm fascinated by what I've learned about you guys, and I'm excited for what you're doing there in Europe. I got to spend a little bit of time, about a week in Prague in the Czech Republic. Back in 2004, I was part of a youth orchestra here that did an international tour, and I absolutely loved getting to play a concert and see the city and see some of the outlying areas in the countryside. It was beautiful, and I hope to get to come back someday. So keep up the awesome work, and thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me. I hope I was able to explain and reply everything, and anytime you're in Prague, let me know.
I absolutely will. Next time I'm in Prague, I'll give you a shout. Well, if there's anything we can do for you here, let us know. Guys, on Twitter and everything else, we'll be sharing information about how you can reach out to Vaclav in the show notes to the podcast. If you have the opportunity, make sure you subscribe on iTunes or Google Play or wherever you're listening, and give us a good rating. I always love to see those and get feedback from you guys that are listening to us. So y'all have a great day, and we'll talk to y'all again next week.
Please subscribe and rate us on iTunes to help spread the word. We'll be back with you next week with more campaign insights from My Campaign Coach.